Statistical simulation. Okay, right now, currently, we cannot click on this button in order to simulate the process. We're going to have to use a standalone version, and besides, it's better for me to demonstrate this because you guys can only access this version right now. So let's say I've saved my diagram. Any of the diagrams you guys have previously configured and saved in your computer can be opened. So we click on it, and I open the diagram. Now, when I open the diagram, you're going to see there's a button here that's called Statistical Simulation. All right. So all we have to do is click on this button called Statistical Simulation, and we're going to input all the parameters for each one of these objects. For example, we're going to say how much are the expected costs for my processes, how much is going to be the expected time, and how are each one of these activities going to be performed? How much time is going to be invested in them? How many resources? So here we can indicate that we're going to work 8 hours per day, 22 days per month. Here's the number of processes I want to test simultaneously. I want to run tests on 10 simultaneous processes with a maximum number of 1,000. Here I could indicate what's going to be the expected cost. Let's say it's going to be 30,000 for this process and for all of these processes. And now I could click on each one of these objects and input the parameters. For example, I could enter the start message event, and I could indicate the amount of time that's going to be invested in launching this process. For example, I could add a fixed value. I could add, for example, here 5 minutes and let's say $10, and I'll save and exit. The next thing I'll do, well, I'll have to go configuring each one of these different objects in order to simulate it, but we can see it's pretty straightforward. I'll click on the gateway and I'll indicate what's amount of probabilities for the flow to go through the outlet. Yes. So I'm going to say, well, only 20% of the time. Okay. So I'll drag and drop this here. I'll save and exit. And I'll continue to input the parameters in the rest of the objects. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because there is a lot of information that we have regarding simulation. So if we want to learn more about simulation, we can look up the documentation in the knowledge base, or even on YouTube, we've got a video with more details on how to set the parameters to this feature. Okay, so I just set up a few parameters to each one of these objects. So as we can see, when I click on each task, I've been adding some time. For example, how much is the requester? Is it going to take the requester in order to complete his activities and so on? Now, the next thing we want to do is run a test, okay, with the parameters we input. So I'd click run, and here we'd see the results. Basically, everything is being completed on time except for this notification. It's taking a little bit more than what was expected. I could change the parameters. For example, I could click on this gateway and I could say, well, let's see what would happen if instead of 40% of orders being reprocessed, let's say it's going to be 50 or 50, let's say 60%. So I'll save, I'll run another test. Okay, now we can see we are running late. We have an alarm. And here we have an alert. Actually, we've had a lot of processes running, 1,000. And of all these processes, there's not been that many who've actually had an alert or an alarm. Okay, so when we click here on each object, we're going to set up the amount of time that this activity is going to require in order to be performed, and then we can set up alerts and alarms. So if it takes more than 2 days from the beginning of the process in order for this activity to be completed, I need an alert. And if it's going to be 3 days, I need an alarm. Obviously, we could go changing these parameters. We could also change all the different types of distributions. I'm not going to explain all of this in this video, but you guys can check the YouTube channel. You guys can also check our documentation and learn more about these features. Okay, so I've decided I also want to change here. Instead of 60, I want to see what happens if it's 80%. Okay, and now I'm going to run another test. Yes, and here now it's quite obvious that I'm running out of time. All right, so I have to do something. Maybe I'd have to add more resources to this activity. Maybe instead of being one performer, if there should be more, let's say 4 performers. Okay, so I could change all these values in order to have statistical information of what would happen if my process would be running in a certain way. Obviously, this is just statistical simulation based on my own criteria. My criteria could not be right, so it's much better to run processes in a real environment. We're also going to see how to do that right now in a moment after we configure the process. So the last thing I wanted to show you guys here is we can click on this button called reports, and it opens this window here where it gives us all kinds of detailed information regarding our tests. Okay, and if I click here on PDF, I can export a report. So I'm going to store it in my desktop. Okay, so I'm going to my desktop, and here I'm going to open the report, and we can see I automatically build this quick report giving me all kinds of information of how much time was involved in each activity and so on.